want to talk about the word peace for a moment. We all have our vision of that, whether it's in our personal life or in the world. Many people pray for peace. I think sometimes the way to look forward is to take a look backwards and see what we've learned about the importance of peace and when peace was avoided and war was chosen instead. And I use the word chosen. Here in America, only the battle for independence and, of course, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War are the only two, more or less, that have been fought on our ground. Mostly they've all been in Europe and in the South Pacific. I want to talk about the effect for a minute and a new perspective on peace and why it should always be our goal. And there are tyrants in the world that don't share the same values that we do. They're not Christian. They don't share the same values of a different religion that's also peaceful, whatever it may be. But they think to obtain their objectives that violence is the way to do it. And think about Christ, and would he ever attain his objectives through violence, or ask us to? Of course not. So let's go back for a minute, and just for a minute, because you have a perception of, say, the Second World War, and what you learned in school and things on Biography Channel that you've seen. But maybe I can get you to think about it in a little different way, and I think maybe we can get more people to think of it in a different way, the toll that it took. There were 20 million Russians killed, 6 million Jews, and over nearly 600,000 Americans in the Second World War. We think about the Battle of Midway. We think about MacArthur returning to the Philippines. Yeah, that's what we think of. And this is a very emotional subject for me, because I've been thinking about it. It's inspired me at times. So I'll save that part for last. But two places I want to talk about during the Second World War. Dresden was a city still is a city in Germany, and our Allied bombers firebombed that city to the extent that people weren't burned to death, they suffocated. The fires were consuming all the oxygen. And you know, it wasn't just soldiers, it was families like yours that didn't have air, literally. Maybe war could have been avoided and peace sought, and that's the goal, that's the lesson. That's how important it is when you think about your child in Dresden that night that the Allied bombers came. I understand their objective. It's terrible to think about. The other one that's always bothered me was in Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. The two islands in the South Pacific that we dropped an atom bomb on. The first one was Hiroshima, and that's the one I've read about the most. And it seems that a little after 8 o'clock in the morning, we dropped that atom bomb. And there's video of it going off. There were kids at school that morning. There were people at work. They didn't harbor any ill will towards us or the Russians or anyone. They were like your child, or your neighbor's kids, or your grandkids. They were just at school. And America, through its wonderful technology, split the atom, created the first atomic weapon, and we used it to shorten the war. And I understand that. They say if we hadn't dropped that, we'd have had to invade Tokyo, and we might have lost had 1 million casualties. I understand that. I want to take you back to Hiroshima that morning at 8 o'clock, when that bomb hit. The bomb released radiation that burned people, and the 3 schools, the elementary schools there, collapsed. as did almost every building. And I want you for a minute, if you're thinking about peace, think about that. Think about those buildings collapsing on the kids. And they're burned. Some of them died instantly. What bothers me terribly is some of them didn't. And if you've ever burned yourself, you know how painful that is. But you go get relief. But they were trapped in the building without their parents. I have a son. I can't imagine. So when you're thinking about peace, think about those 3 schools in Hiroshima. While politicians can talk about politics all they want, as good people, as Christians, let's think about the kids instead. And the price. They didn't do anything wrong. Peace has to be the goal at all times. That's a different perspective on the Second World War.